Now we're here for another episode of Rings of Power to get hyped. I have brought us a new and exciting, different visual element to doing Rings of Power, which we all might get excited about. This might help us as we go through the episode and discuss things that have happened. We are on, what is it, episode 5? Jason?
Episode 5.
Mostly. Guess what I have resolved? We are going to slowly, avoiding all copyright possible, walk through the episode as
oh my gosh,
as I visually have it in the background. I could not resolve this before. I was having issues, but we're doing it now. I'm going to move this a little bit. All right. Well, good Lord. I had mixed feelings about this episode, incidentally. I don't know how to describe this more or less. But mute being on, we're going to do this sort of zooming through. We start out with Hobbit girl hanging out with well, you didn't have mixed feelings. We could get there. I suppose if I were going to describe it overall, because this is more of a conclusion conversation, I was actually, certain elements of the episode I thought were interesting and were good and it sort of fell into its own pace. And other elements I thought were just awful, just terrible. And
I felt it was boring with tonal inconsistencies, logical inconsistencies strewn throughout it.
At any rate, we start out with Hobbit girl talking to the stranger or not Gandalf. And they're having conversations. The conversation really didn't mean anything to me. I don't know if anybody cared.
No, it was a dumb conversation where he's like, I'm bad. It's like, no, you're not bad.
She tells him about death as if he's a child and doesn't understand anything. Oh no, I don't want that.
Well, I mean, it is consistent to say that they're treating him as a child because for some reason they decided to yeet this guy from wherever. We have no confirmation of who he is, although we kind of suspect.
He's not Gandalf.
Right.
totally not.
But the thing is that the fact that that if this does turn out to be a Maya, and it may turn out to be Gandalf, it may turn out to be one of the other wizards, who cares? But if this is a Maya, why would they send an angel to Middle Earth and basically make them an idiot?
No, we've gone over this before. It makes no sense for them to yeet him to the planet, especially when the wizards were sent with a goal to help, to guide, to assist Middle Earth into surviving evil on purpose because of evil reemerging with Sauron on the planet. That was the goal. Why would you yeet him into the planet with no memories? It's the most illogical way for any god to actually assist the planet by sending a guide that doesn't know what he is or who he is. Like, he could have easily...
Or what he's supposed to be doing.
Well, depending on where he lands, he could have easily just become a bad guy if he was abused horribly, but depending on who he runs into.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. And it's like, well, you don't know if he's a wizard. Sorry, Silver, go ahead.
So are they trying to imply, like, Hobbit girl here is teaching him how to speak?
I think so.
Or does he kind of know already?
No, I think she's teaching him words and concepts.
He does. He does know how to speak, but he doesn't know how to speak to them.
Yeah. So I was like, are they trying to say like she's teaching a language to him, or what is happening? Because suddenly he's just talking more in this episode when he was saying like one word before. Now he's kind of saying small sentences.
Mm-hmm. It kind of implies that she's teaching him. That's the best I could tell. By the way, the only sense it would make if he is a wizard is he would be one of 3. It would have to be Saruman, Gandalf, or Radagast. It wouldn't be the Blue Wizards because they came in pairs.
Right. The there is some argument that I've heard online recently that this isn't Gandalf, that it's actually Saruman.
Okay, fine.
According to Tolkien, Saruman came first.
Yeah, he should be here already then.
But the thing is that we can't rely on them to make this Saruman because they've changed so many other things. So why would we believe that they're following the lore here in this instance?
Right, and speculation is trying to, clearly they've deviated from the lore and we're leaning too much on our expectations from the lore, which perhaps is being unfair to the show. That being said, we don't know if he's a wizard or not. So I'll still call him not Gandalf, even though it looks a lot like it's going to be Gandalf. I did hear one speculation that if he is Saruman, then it's an opportunity to redeem himself. I think I brought this up last week, and it's like, how can he redeem himself when he hasn't done anything yet? It's like pre-redeem himself, I guess.
Yeah, it shows him to be a good guy, that he's actually there to help out, but then it shows how far he falls eventually. It's like, well, that's kind of dumb.
Well, needless to say, we're getting into the weeds when it comes to that sort of thing. Let's shift on. She keeps insisting you're a good person. He's like, I am? And then we'll move on. They're pushing carts. And they're going to migrate because the Harfoots migrate, the not hobbits. And everybody's got their really stupid headdresses on that some really artsy person was just in love designing the outfits for these characters.
Yeah.
they were super into it. Can I just, as a nitpick, granted this is a nitpick that doesn't make, isn't bearing on the plot at all. He's so much bigger than them. Why is he pushing? Why doesn't he just pull it? He could run with the thing. He's so much bigger than everybody else.
He could pick it up and chuck it.
Well, it just doesn't make any sense why he's pushing it from behind.
No.
Yeah, is it some weird Harfoot law? Like, nothing can carry your wagon for you. Like, no oxen or whatever.
You cannot touch the handle. Sacred Harfoot.
You can only touch the handle if you're actually a Harfoot.
They have a very. I am a sucker for folky singing, and they have a very folky, Irishy, Scottishy, British Islesy sort of singing. The song was all right. I don't think it was brilliant, but I quite enjoyed it. And I thought tonally, this first bit was fine. I thought tonally, I was okay with the Harfoots at this point. And they almost have this slight reflection of we're going on a journey and the light singing and whatnot. I thought the beginning was fine. I was all right going on to this. And then we move on to some hipster chicks hanging out, looking at the holy felon when he was yeeted to the planet.
What are these supposed to be?
The internet speculation is that they're the Nazgul, like the pre-Nazgul, which actually turns it into people are calling them the Nazgals.
Right, I've heard that, but yeah. But the Nazguls were wraiths. They didn't really.
Well, they're not there yet, Jason. This is pre. Well, and the Nazgul were also kings of men.
Right.
These are clearly not kings of men, but low be it for them to stick to the lore. Clearly they could be anything, but a lot of speculation is because they were corrupted kings of men. But you can't have corrupted kings of men if they're already corrupted. So I think logically they probably aren't the Nazgals or whatever. But it's funny to speculate that they are. She also has, looking at this image, she also has a star sign sketched on a plate. So there might be some connection there because he keeps looking at the star sign. Something I hadn't thought of yet. Then we have Adar. Having had more time with the actor expressing Adar as a character, he's quite engaging. I think he does a really good job with this character. Kind of wistful.
Creepy.
Yeah, wistful, introspective, a little creepy. I actually quite like how good the actor's doing with this character. It makes Adar more engaging, despite the fact Adar as a character doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I quite like this little monologue he does, and he does foreshadow here that eventually they will lose the light, sort of thing. There is some foreshadowing involved, and you might go, "Oh, you haven't seen the show." Well, I know what happens, but some interesting foreshadowing. And we get up to everybody's favorite scene, which there's been a lot. I got to get a really good shot here. Oh, gosh dang it. Anyway, Bronwyn goes up to speak to. I'm gonna let it play for a second. I just need the big shot of the crowd. My repeated issue with Bronwyn is there's just an implication for some reason that somehow she's in charge. I don't know why. Gosh dang it. You know what I mean? I don't know why she's in charge.
She is in charge. But yeah, they don't really give a reason for her to be in charge.
Or why anybody listens to them. She wasn't in a position of authority in the village. She was literally like the flower girl, the apothecary. Like it makes no sense. This is a notorious scene. I don't know if anybody knows why it's notorious. If you look closely, the crowd is actually a lot smaller when they filmed this, and they filled out the crowd by copying a lot of people and repeating them. So if you watch really carefully, you can find like old man on the left is also on the right. It's the same guy, just positioned slightly differently. And then there's another old man on the right who's also on the left. And then there's another guy here on the bottom left who's also farther over. So apparently the crowd wasn't as crowded, and they decided to just clone people and randomly place them around to make it seem like it was more crowded as a crowd than it was originally in the filming, which is hilarious, especially considering how much money they spent on this show.
It probably would have been cheaper to just get a bunch of extras.
Well, it's a fun game, if you're so inclined. Sit and point out the people. Pause this video and point out all the people you could find that are copies. Have you found any yet, Silver?
Where's Waldo? I know I've seen this image before.
There's an old man with like a headband on the left, a bit on the top. He's got a beard. He's got like a lighter colored tunic. Do you see him? Beard to the left of her, near the top. Anyway, he's on the right.
Yeah.
Standing above another guy that looks like the same guy he's standing above on the left. And he's got a beard and a head. Do you see him?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, it's so obvious. We're like, oh, that's awful. People are the internet is full of autistic people. I'm not weighing on that as a moral stance. I mean by that of the internet is full of autistic people and they're obsessive about what they watch. The nerve to think people aren't going to notice watching this show. They aren't going to look and go, wait a minute.
Hold on a gosh darn second.
You couldn't hire 20 more people to fill out your crowd. You can hire a handful more people.
Only had to duplicate half of the people.
Yeah, I wonder how big the crowd was originally, but it's really bad. This is really bad. Regardless, she tries to give this rousing speech to unite everybody when I've been given no indication as to why anybody should trust her or believe in her. Like, she's just suddenly in charge, which is confusing to me narratively. I'm not saying this because, oh, well, woman in charge, but if you're going to put her in charge, which it's less likely for there to be a woman in charge, but if you're going to put her in charge, establish her as a leader of the village from the beginning. There's some sort of council. She's some sort of village elder. She's a president, whatever you're going to call her. And then she gives orders from the beginning. Instead of she just steps in and she's like, I'm strong woman, hear me. It comes across poor. And this doesn't make any sense. That she's just giving a speech. But she gives a speech of like, everybody come and fight with me and unite with me. But interestingly enough, it doesn't work super well. An old man is like, we should all give up and join orc people. Otherwise we'll die. And a bunch of people follow him. And he almost gets Bronwyn's boy to join in. But he doesn't quite listen. And we're moving to Isildur. There was I don't know how I feel about the story line, this plot line of... So they give us this idea that Isildur wants something else than what he's given in life, right? I don't want to go into dad's business of boating or whatever.
Right.
And he fails out of being boat guy, the sea guard. And he ends up failing out with his other guys. And his dad's real cynical about it. He's like, well, I want to do something else. I want to paint, or I don't know what he wants to do. It just seems like cliche, childish, rebellion-ish sort of, I don't want to do what you want me to do. Well, and then suddenly they're going to war, and he's like, I want to go. And his dad rightfully is like, you've burned all of the other opportunities.
Yeah.
Why should I trust you that you're going to follow through?
We wouldn't be having this conversation if you had just joined the Sea Guard like you were supposed to.
Well, and the turnaround of his personality doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. It makes no sense why he would be like, well, I don't want to join the Sea Guard. Well, now I do.
It's like, oh, okay. Sorry, Silver, you were going to say something?
Well, that's just what I was going to get into. He doesn't want to be part of the Sea Guard, so he's like, I'm going to, sabotage it to leave. But then he's like, let me on boat.
Well, it just seems like
why
suddenly...
Why didn't you just continue with the Sea Guard then?
I don't know. It's like now they're all going to war, and he's like, I want to do it. And it's like, you didn't want to do this before. And he doesn't necessarily have to be in Sea Guard, but he wants to be Soldier Man. But suddenly there's a turnaround, and I don't understand the motivation is what I'm getting at. I don't understand what he's trying to do.
There needed to be something happen that is a catalyst to this change. There needed to be something, a scene, something that explained, like, he suddenly got it. He's like, oh, that's why Dad wanted to be in the Sea Guard. Something of that nature.
It could be even dumber. It could be similar, like, all of my friends are going to war and I'm going to be left alone. I want to go.
Yeah.
But you need to tell me that.
But it needed to be something.
And it's just
this
now...
is what I was talking about with these logical and tonal inconsistencies in the story.
And he has an honest conversation. And I thought the dialogue between the two and Elendil's sort of honest response to everything was really interesting, because he fairly was like you've screwed up everything else. Why should I buy that you're going to be a man now and do your responsibility? He's like, no. He's like, no, you're not going. You failed out and suddenly you want to go? Here's another logical inconsistency that I don't understand. That they could have given me a little nugget before this, but we move on to Isildur's sister, who runs into Farazan's son, and she's like, we need to stop this. And I'm like, why do you care? I don't understand. It's like, oh, we need to stop this. Okay. Explain to me why. Why Iradian? They could have given us a scene because she's really passionate. This is going to be terrible. Blah blah blah. But they don't explain why she's so passionate about stopping this invasion. They could have given us a scene earlier where she's talking to her family and she's worried they're going to die. She's worried about her brother and her father. They could have given us a scene earlier where she's like, it's none of our business. We should have been involved. And then when this happened, she's really upset. She's like, I need to do something about it. But it feels like out of nowhere, we're getting a scene with the daughter where she's trying to stop what's happening and trying to convince this kid because he fancies her. And I'm like, what is the motivation? Yeah. Like, you gave me nothing. I don't know why she's doing this. Why is her motivation so different from brother and father? Like, what makes her different? Why does she care differently? And you might go, oh, well, she cares about her brother and father. Well, then show me that. You've given me nothing. You can't just tell me to imply things in the beginning, in the in-between, like their character development had occurred without anything happening. Show me this. Show me what's going on. Instead, it's just out of nowhere. I'm anti this invasion. Oh, why? Everybody else is super into it. Explain.
Which is weird, which is another weird thing. They were so like, we can't do the elf thing. We got to get away from the elves. And now everybody's all like, yeah, let's go. We got to support the elves. Like,
that was my biggest problem with the last episode. It was so confusing. They literally overthrew the last king for wanting to reconnect with the elves, and now they're like, yeah, let's go to war for him. I'm like, what? Excuse me?
Yeah. And there's like a couple of people who are like, no, we should be not doing this, guys.
Nobody pushed back. Even Farazan, who was the head of the anti-elf stuff.
Yeah. You would think that there would be something here that would be like, we had to do more to convince these people that this was the right thing. Now, the thing is that there's a scene where Farazan talks to our Farazan talks to his son, and his son is like, "Why are we doing this? We shouldn't be following the elves."
Yeah, we're not there yet. We're getting there.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and go to the next part.
Halbrand's making swords. He's super making swords, and apparently he's super good at it. And they're like, ooh, swords. And then they show up and they're like, you need to go talk to the queen. And he's like, I'll go talk to the queen.
This is the thing that's really stupid. He went in to talk to this dude, and the dude's like, well, you have to have a guild badge. It's like, well,
That's the least of the problems. Why is he out of prison?
Yeah, there is that. But it's that whole thing where he ended up in prison made no sense.
There's a lot like it's this whole scenario is weird, and they even recognize that there are issues with this, where Galadriel goes, "Oh, he's the king of the Southlands. We need to help him overthrow the bad guys because king of the Southlands," and it's like, wait. And he even goes like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm not. At no point did he make any claims. She just extrapolates because he has a little bag. That somehow evolves in. Well, it somehow evolves into them going to war, and he's suddenly out of prison, where he perhaps was going to be executed for violence. Now he's suddenly out of prison making stuff, and then they bring him forward, and they even recognize where it's like, oh, so you're the king of the Southlands. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, well, Galadriel told me otherwise. If there's going to be a problem, I should know, because I'm putting my whole reputation on the line to try and start this war. And Galadriel's like, nah, it's super a thing. Like, I appreciate that they're recognizing how dumb this is. But the interaction between these two, where Galadriel is talking to him, literally is using the possibility, not even the possibility, just implying he's a king and using this as an opportunity to go to war and get people killed. She's a psychopath. And she's manipulating this whole thing based upon nothing. He made no claims. He made no justifications. At no point did he claim he was a king or a lord of anything. She saw a little bag of his. And she's like, you're the king. And he's like, wait, what? And she said, no, you're the king. Let's go to war. And he's like, what are we doing?
coat of arms on it.
Well, it meant nothing. And she spun this all into a massive conflict with almost no justification. And even he is like, yeah, she kind of exaggerated this. And the queen's like, excuse me? All of this is Galadriel's manipulation. And everybody's really gullible. She just, by sheer force of her psychotic personality, is shoving the entire world into a conflict. And it's all of her doing. Galadriel is perhaps the villain of the piece. But she's talking him into this. She's talking him into all this violence. We go back to the Harfoots. They see some footsteps, some footprints. Might be evil wolves or something. They have conversation.
Well, they say wolves, but they're wargs.
Well, we've seen wargs. They look different. We have. That's the thing.
I know. But the wolves don't look like those things.
This whole scene is sort of set up so that not Gandalf can do some magic and then hurt his hand. That seems to be most of the motivation. I'm going to take it off screen because it's going to want to do an advertisement because Amazon sucks. But yeah, more or less that's what happens in this scene. They create the wolf scenario so that he can do magic and we can all get excited about what had happened. Silver, what are you thinking?
Nothing.
Her mind has gone blank from the stupidity.
Yeah. I got nothing.
Well, we've got ads to hide through in the background. So Jason, why don't you talk to us what you're thinking at this point?
Oh, I see what you're doing.
Again, this pointed to me to, like you said, this was a chance for Gandalf to show off. But instead of them continuing with the wonder and the awe that Gandalf could provoke because of him doing magic, because of him being able to do magic, suddenly he is now afraid of him because of his ability to do magic.
Well, they have this really odd scene, which we haven't
doesn't make sense.
We have this odd scene that we haven't quite gotten yet, where he puts his hand in the river and makes ice, I guess, to like heal his hand,
his arm or something.
And she does a very nonsensical thing by touching it, and then she gets hurt, and then she blames him for it. She looks at him like, "How could you?" And it's like, you touched it.
Not only that, but when everything gets resolved in that, I shouldn't say resolved, but when he heals himself using his magic, he's muttering magic words to himself and all that stuff. She looks at her hand, which had previously been frozen to Gandalf, not Gandalf's arm, and it was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
There was nothing wrong with it.
One of the greatest scenes ever.
It's not like she lost her hand.
One of the greatest scenes ever we've moved into is Galadriel teaches him how to use swords.
Oh my gosh. This part.
This is perhaps... Oh, look at the hair on this guy. Look at that. Think that's a wig? You think this is a wig?
It has
that is 100% a wig.
Strong diversity, too. Oh. It's got to have one of everything. But yeah, she, in the most nonsensical, like, if she's supposed to be an amazing warrior, she's like, here's one of the ways to kill an orc. How does she even phrase it? Because it almost implies that that's the only way, and it's like, there's a lot of ways to...
She's like, I'll keep it simple for you, and it was like stab, twist, and gut or something. Yeah. I'm like,
What would you twist?
It's basic. It opens the wound, makes it wider.
Yeah.
They'll bleed out and die faster.
Is it going to make it difficult to withdraw?
I don't think so, actually.
How many people have you
Damage is more
stabbed?
None.
Well,
Several.
you know. Oh, Silver, as our resident stabbing expert,
Yes.
tell me about this combat. Is she
Actually,
treating
one.
legitimate? You've stabbed one person?
I mean,
Yes, but just with a fork.
Oh.
did you twist and then gut?
No, I went back to eating my dinner.
Oh, you
Oh.
failure. Did you pierce the skin?
Unfortunately, no.
Well, then,
Okay, no.
I've poked people
No,
with
It wasn't
things.
quite that hard.
It's not a stabbing if you don't pierce the skin. Then it's a poke. You poke them with a fork. You're claiming stabbing glory that you don't possess. What would you call
Dishonor
that?
on you, dishonor on your fork.
Dishonor on your family. What is this? Stolen valor? Jason has stolen stabbing valor. Regardless, to speak on the characteristic of this, she comes across as snidey, as condescending,
Condescending. Yeah.
as just as her character tends to be. She teaches them nothing besides "I'm so much cooler than you are." Like there's no lesson here. She just beats them up.
No. She goes head to head against like 6 people, and it's only because she's fighting 6 people that this dude actually manages to cut her clothing.
Not even her skin at that.
No.
Like, really?
Well, that's not even the point. The combat is just awful. There's a lot of Hollywood
it's
sword fighting
terrible.
in this, where there's a lot of twirling and turning your back to people and like nonsensical combat sort of thing that you see in like Hollywood combat. And not to hold it to a standard that most sword fighting doesn't hold to, but there's a lot of like flurry and flourishing and like spinning, which is just really silly. Like it's unnecessary for this type of combat.
Disarming people and
I like Hollywood sword fighting, just like clashing swords for no reason. Because one of the biggest criticisms you might find if you ever pay attention to actual sword fighting is people don't just clash swords for the purpose of clashing. They're trying to parry and then cut. They're not just hitting each other's swords. It's a problem you'll find in any sort of martial art where it's like, you're not trying to hit the other person. You're trying to go through the routine of striking the others, doing the block or whatever. And it's like, no, you're trying to hit the other person. And the twirling and the spinning. Have you noticed every time somebody picks up a weapon, they do the flourish? Every time. There's that elf lady in the ditch who picked up a spear and flourished the spear. And I was like, ugh. Was that necessary?
Yeah, Halbrand picks up a sword and does some fancy twirls with it, and she looks at him and says, "No blacksmith, I've never seen a blacksmith do that."
No blacksmith could twirl.
Kind of implying that, you're more than just a simple blacksmith. You can't fool me.
Isildur's friend becomes a lieutenant, not based upon competency or capacity to lead men, but because he got a lucky hit on some elf chick.
Yep.
So that's how you pick soldiers in combat. Rather than somebody who's good at leading men. Our Farazan has a conversation with his son. He's like, well, maybe this is part of my schemes to go to war. It'll have the Southlands beholding to us and trade and whatnot. And it's like, well, if you've got greater ambitions for the island when it comes to trade and wealth, why cut off the elves who are perhaps one of the biggest trading partners you could have? Mr. Mega Racism.
Yeah.
But he has...
I mean, the thing is that they are prejudiced against the elves because of reasons. Apparently, the fact that the elves are immortal and magical beings, apparently that means that we have to be racist against them. And this is again, this is one of those things where, if they had come out and said something, it's like, look, this is actually a good idea for us, because if we help the Southlands, it'll open up wealth for us, for our island. We can bring in, raw materials. We can open up trade. We can et cetera, et cetera. But this is this guy on the side telling his son, no, no, this is part of my scheme. See, what we're going to do is we're going to go and help them, and then they're going to have to give us tribute. Like, ugh, stupid.
What? Why not just colonize? Why is it such a...
Yeah.
Like, and it makes it sound like an evil scheme, when this is a scheme that any empire might do ever.
Yeah.
It's like,
you know,
here's
if
my
we help
evil
them out-
scheme. I'm going to help somebody, and they'll trade with us because they owe
want to
us.
thank me.
They'll thank me like any empire has ever done. Institute trade routes and do deals. Mwahaha. It's like, oh, how ambitious of you. She goes, the Queen Regent Muriel goes to talk to her dad and the king who was removed, Palantir. And she explains to them, we're going to do the things you wanted to do with the elves, and we're going to Middle Earth. And he's like, don't, it's going to be bad. Foreshadowing.
Again, this is one of the things that is logically inconsistent in the show. He wanted to go to Middle Earth. He wanted to get in touch with the elves. And now that they're doing it,
He's
suddenly
like, no.
it's like, no, don't do that.
Yeah. He puts his hand in the thing. She touches it. She freezes her hand. She looks at him like, you monster. How could you let me do that to myself? And also this scene is a little confusing. If you look at her hand, it's not wet or cold anymore.
Yeah, it's completely fine. Rather than being like stunned that you just witnessed all this magic and he healed himself and you are completely untouched. Yeah.
Well, it's like if I started a fire and then Silver put her hand in the fire and then looked at me like, how could you? I was like, I didn't do anything.
Yeah, you did. You started a fire.
Shut up, Silver. Sick
I
your
didn't tell you to
duff.
put your hand in it.
I should be able to touch it.
This isn't a hand fire. They're having a dinner with the elves and the dwarves, and there's a lot of I don't trust you, and you don't trust me. And he tells some story about
Give
a
me your
table. Yeah.
Gil-galad is pushing to find out why the dwarves are picking up their mining activities before. It's like, what do you know of the dwarves? You haven't sent anybody to Khazad-dûm in at least 20 years. How would you know that the dwarves have amped up their mining activities?
He knows everything. Gil-galad is so passive when it comes to the events. He should be one of the greatest warriors of all time. Of all time. At any rate, they're having conversation, and he's like, "Oh, the dwarf left." He's like, "Oh, by the way, they have this stuff. Did you find it?" And he's like, "I can't tell you." He's like, "I made a promise to put my hand on a rock." And he's like, "You owe us. You're kind." And here's where we run into a massive lore change that makes almost no logical sense. And it's confusing.
Yeah. Apparently,
Jason, elaborate on what happened, will you?
So apparently an elf and a Balrog were on top of a mountain fighting over a tree. And then lightning struck the tree, and the power of the elf and the Balrog combined and created Mithril.
Never happened in the lore.
No.
This isn't a thing. But they also imply it's connected to the Silmarils in some way.
Yes, the tree was somehow. That's what it was. It was rumored that the tree was the last hiding place of the last Silmaril, and that's one of the reasons they were fighting over the tree.
Well, then what
They did a
happened?
Dragon Ball fusion.
Well,
Yeah.
then the lightning struck the tree, and so possibly the Mithril is a combination of the lightning, the power of the elf, the power of the Balrog, and the Silmaril all kind of wrapped up, and it created Mithril.
Setting aside that this is nonsensical, didn't happen, this is not where Mithril came from. All right. Setting that aside, the reason for this story is to emphasize the idea that because the elves are distant from the Valar, the gods, from the light of the Valar, that they're in decline and fading.
Yeah.
That's not what's happening to the elves. The elves are fading because they're losing sort of their power and authority over Middle Earth later, but not at this point.
Right.
They're not in decline. There's perhaps in decline because so many of them died in the wars with Morgoth. But there's no sort of fading of the elves necessarily. But the fading of the elves is more metaphorical, and it's not literally they are fading out.
The fading of the elves was because they were returning from Middle Earth to Valinor, not because they were like dying out. It's just like, we did what we came here on Middle Earth to do. We're going back home.
But what
they were fading.
What this does is it creates an element to the elves that never existed before, where they require the light of the Valar, implying that the light of the Valar being in the Silmarils, which now changes the whole war over the Silmarils, that they need the light of the Silmarils, which is the light of the Valar, to help maintain themselves because they're literally fading from Middle Earth. And this will help maintain them if they can have enough Mithril to, I guess, give to all of the elves in the form of clothing or jewelry or something.
I don't know. Like,
this is so stupid, I cannot express accurately enough why this is dumb. It makes no sense. I don't.
Now, I could get behind it if it was like, Sauron did this thing to us, and now there's this disease, and the only cure for it is Mithril. It's like, even that would be better than what we got here.
No,
we just don't have a certain spectrum of light, and because we don't have that spectrum of light here in Middle Earth, we're all gonna die. It's like, what?
We don't have enough UV rays. We need to.
We need to put a hole in the ozone layer right over Rivendell.
Oh, it's just we don't have the light of the Valar, and we're going to decline. And it's like, well,
photosynthesis.
Well, and he implies like this is going to save the. Well, here's the thing: it implies that this is going to save the elves, and it's like you've already started sending people back to Valar. Just go back then.
Just go, yeah. Get on a boat.
Leave.
What are you doing sticking around here?
While you're desperately trying to stick around.
Sauron's gone. You already think that Sauron's gone and that he is no longer an issue. You just sent Galadriel back because you thought that that there was no threat anymore. Why are the rest of you sticking around?
They created this weird, like, magical necessity for the elves to be next to the light of the Valar. They created essentially artificially a problem that the elves have to fix to justify, I would assume, the creation of the rings. And the creation of the rings didn't need this justification. The justification was it granted them power over Middle Earth, essentially. That it gave them enough power to push back against the evil. They did it wasn't because they were fading away. They created the rings to help sort of give them authority over the land. And it granted them
Right.
powers of kind and that sort of thing. But that was essentially the goal by creating the rings in the first place. The goal in Lord of the Rings is they created these rings to help the mortals and the elves and the dwarves and whatnot to sort of consolidate their power over Middle Earth to push back against evil. Well, Sauron knew they were doing that, and he made one ring to control the rest. That was the whole purpose. Giving him authority over everything. Now that they need the rings to help save the elves, it takes
why would
away.
they then create?
Well, why would Sauron need one ring to control that? Why would he need to control?
Well, not only
their
that,
rings?
but why would they then create the rings for the dwarves and the humans
Precisely.
if all the rings are good for is to help the elves not die?
Or fade or whatever. It removes
They're really-
Sauron's motivation for the One Ring. Because it
Yeah.
gives him authority over the other rings of power. The show's called Rings of Power. But if the rings aren't created for the sole purpose of granting power to the wielder to help protect their realm, if the ring's purpose is to help stop the fading of the elves, then why would Sauron give a shit?
Not only that, but why would the dwarves help out?
Why would they
Because
give them to the
if
men?
If the rings are just there to help the elves, and there's no benefit to the dwarves or the humans, who cares?
This plot line
Just
is
the elves.
so vital to the purpose of this show. This plot line, and it's very dumb. And the rest of this show and season 2, and if they get subsequent seasons, all hinder on what they made here, and it makes no sense. Why would Sauron even care? He's like, okay, fading of the elves. Like, he would have more purpose if he corrupted the rings to stop it from giving the light of the Valar to help save them, or he took the rings from them so that they couldn't save themselves. But why would he care if
Right.
the other races had rings? It doesn't. None of those make sense.
But yeah, it's that
They're rings of
the
power.
elves can go hang.
That's why he made the One Ring to control the other rings of power. That's the point. That's the name of your show. Silver, help me out.
Can't.
What do you think? What do you think about this? How does this change your perspective on Lord of the Rings?
Oh, so dumb.
Come on, you've got
can't
thoughts about
help.
this. No.
I don't.
Well, what do you think? What do you think the goal was? Why do you think they're doing because this changes everything? Because previously in the lore, Mithril was everywhere. It was found everywhere. Jason pointed out last week that it was found on Numenor.
It was still a rare metal.
Well, right.
But it was still mined in various places. It wasn't like the Misty Mountains and the mines of Moria were the only sources of Mithril.
Well, and it should also be pointed out, which is a flaw in this element. They allude to the Silmarils in the beginning, but the show never fully explains why the Silmarils are important. So we don't really fully understand, me and Jason understand because we've read the books, but the show at no point justifies why the Silmarils are such a big deal and justifies why it's a big deal that the Silmaril might be here that creates, because they're going, we desperately need this ore. And it's like, well, just go get the Silmaril. It's on top of the mountain, I assume.
You'd think. But I mean, the other thing is that if you really look into what the Silmarils are, they're just jewels.
Well, they
Yes,
contain
they're
the
very
light of the
pretty.
trees.
Right. They're very pretty, but it's not like the jewels made somebody invincible or
No, they
had
have no
special
magical
magic-
element except for they're so pretty that literally Satan was obsessed with them. That's how beautiful
Yeah.
they were.
That's it.
Yes. Silver, there's a story in where Morgoth steals the Silmarils, and he sits and stares at them for like I guess weeks, and at some point he eventually is driven out of his stupor by staring at the beauty of the Silmarils, because he sees his own reflection and is horrified, and it sort of takes him out of his stupor about how beautiful these jewels are. That's how amazing.
It took him weeks to
Yeah.
see his
Well,
reflection.
literally, the reason why the elves are in Middle Earth is because they stole the Silmarils, and Feanor was pissed off, and he took thousands of elves with him, thousands, to cause a war against Morgoth to get them back. Like, that was the whole motivation for why all the Noldor are in Middle Earth in the first place. That's why Elrond's people and Galadriel's people showed up, is because they wanted to get the jewels back, because Feanor was pissed off. Despite the fact that Feanor stole the light from the trees and put them in the jewels. And he's like, but they're mine. And you're right. They essentially have no magic purpose. They're just super pretty.
I mean, they do have, like, nothing evil can touch them. And if something evil touches them, it burns them. But
Because it's just
that's why
pure,
Morgoth put him in the crown.
pure heaven light, more or less.
Yeah. But they're really not anything super special.
Except
Not
for
like they were the One Ring that had.
Well, they are massively desirable. That's more or less what makes them so special. Like, massive amounts of people died because of how much they want these jewels. Believe it or not, sort of a proto Silmaril is the Arkenstone in The Hobbit, which was written before the Silmarillion.
Right.
And where they have their own internal light, and it's super beautiful, and you'll do anything for it, sort of thing.
And if they were actually looking for the light of the Valar, there's a star that's pretty much a Silmaril that is shining over Middle Earth all the time.
Or you could just go to the Valar and watch them open the giant Valar butt to peer into heaven, and you'll get the light that way. Just sort of float outside of Valar for a little bit, and then go home, and you're refreshed. You rebooted. You got your batteries filled up. Probably last you 20 years. Go do it again. Maybe vacation in Valinor. It's like the Hawaii for the elves.
Yeah.
I cannot
Go there and wear floral shirts.
Yeah, pretend they're a native even though they're not. I cannot overemphasize how not just lore breaking, but how stupid it is and how vital it is to the story they're building. That what just was displayed there is the crux of the show. And weirdly enough, I don't know why the tree is going bad. Like, the tree is attached to the light of the valley. Like, I don't understand that fully.
And apparently they brought the tree with them on the boats.
Okay,
They're like,
so
you know what? We're going to go invade Middle Earth to get the Silmarils back. We need to bring some trees with us.
So anything from heaven needs heaven's light, or it'll go bad. I mean, the Sindarin elves don't have this problem.
Right.
Why do the Noldoran
Maybe they
have
should
this
go
problem?
ask them what their secret is. Well, the Sindarin elves never actually went to Valinor, and that's the difference.
So if you've ever been to heaven, you can't go back. Well, like if you've been to heaven, you can't stay way too long. It'll kill you. You got the heaven disease. Anyway, they have a pressing conversation. We need that Mithril, and he's like, I don't want to betray my friend. They have a big party and they sing, and then they go talk to Isildur, who's like, let me on the boats, and he's like, no, and then he punches him. And then Isildur's like, I'm gonna sneak on the boat. So he sneaks on boat. I'm gonna sneak on boat. And then Pharazon's son is like, I'm gonna set fire boat. And he's like, no, don't do that. And the other guy's, no, don't do that. And it ends up setting fire, and they jump in water. And I guess that's enough for Isildur to get on boat. And he didn't stop the war. I guess. Even though they never
Yes.
fully explain the perspective of let's not go to war. Like, they never explore the reasoning against this conflict. Apparently, young girl and young boy are the only ones wise enough to see this is going to be a disaster. Oh, and the really old king. So, you know, we don't explore that point of view in contrast to we all got to go kill some things. The insanity of Galadriel and her bloodlust.
Her tempest.
Her tempest in her. Anyway, they talk about what we're gonna do with the battle goals. Any reflection on this scene? No. Then they talk about the stones again, and they're like, "We sent you with a secret purpose." And he's like, "I didn't know." And it's like, "Well, how would you know about your secret purpose if they never told you?" It's kind of confusing. I know we're not there yet, but he talks to Durin. He's like, "I went to you for a secret purpose that you didn't know about, and I didn't know about." And it's like, well, how were you there for that secret purpose if you didn't know what you were trying to do in the first place?
Yeah, we sent you on a secret mission to the dwarves, but we didn't tell you what the goal of that secret mission was. We just, hoped you would stumble onto it.
Well, it's so awkwardly explained because he's like, "I was duplicitous and I didn't know." And I was like, well, then how were you duplicitous? Like, you have to be in on it. If you're going to undermine your best friend or buddy, like, you kind of have to be a part of the scheme.
You can't lie to somebody. I mean, you can tell somebody a lie.
Not if you don't know.
It may be, but yeah, if you don't know, then it's the truth to you. It still may be a lie in the end, but it's not like you were actively trying to deceive the person. And he wasn't. He was there to get help from the dwarves. And that was it.
There's probably a lot that could be said about this scene between Galadriel and Halbrand, where they're talking, where he basically says, "You're using me." And she's like, "Well, I'm going to make you a king and stuff. Like, it could be that you're using me." And it's like, what kind of psychotic logic is this? She's like, "Oh, yeah, but everybody wants to be king." It's a really weird, there's probably a lot that could be sort of siphoned out of this scene. I don't know. She's basically convincing him that she's scheming to make him king, and he doesn't like it, but he should like it. And he's not wrong that she's manipulated everything and using him for her own purposes. She's super doing this.
Yep.
Which I think is a fair...
There's no thought to any of her decisions.
No.
There's no moment of reflection of like, did the benefits outweigh the cost here? No, she just does it with no explanation.
She does have this interesting moment where she's like, "I can't stop because of the bloodlust." You remember? Where she's like, "I can't stop."
Yeah.
I don't remember that part.
Does anybody else get the feeling that they wrote the show, they filmed the show, and then they wrote the next one, rather than like having an actual overarching vision for the whole thing?
I don't know. I'm trying to find this quote where he's like, "You don't know why I ended up on that raft," and it shows like a cutscene of them like giving fealty to Adar, and they think he might be Sauron or something. And then they have a conversation about what she lost. I'm trying to find this quote for Silver. Let's say, "You were asking me to go to the one place I swore never to return. I don't want to be copyright struck. The least you could do is tell me why." And her, "Why do you keep fighting?" And she's crying, and she goes, "Because I cannot stop." She's insane. This is her bloodlust moment. She's like, I got the bloodlust. I can't stop. My obsession is driving me. You know, the Gil-galad implies in the beginning of the show, in the first episode, that she will cause the evil to happen because of her obsession with the evil. And it looks like this is going to play out. That because of her obsession, she's going to make it happen. And Gil-galad was right and was so much wiser than this insane woman who was psychotic and obsessed with Sauron. She's at fault. She is literally at fault for everything that's going to happen. It's all her fault. She did all of it. She's the cause of Sauron going bad, of killing all the peoples, of all of the war and the slaughter. It's all of Galadriel's fault. She caused the evil to return because she was obsessed with it. Because of the bloodlust, she couldn't stop. And they tried to exile her because she even recognizes it, that she's like, oh, everybody tried to exile me because I've got the bloodlust. Because I believe they could no longer distinguish me. I get the next quote.
Yeah.
From the evil I was fighting. I think this is meant to be an important character moment for her motivations. For what's going on in her head. That everybody was right, that she's insane, and she's becoming as bad as the bad, if you will. And they're not wrong. If that's her intention, they displayed her like a psychopath. She's a raving lunatic. And she's like, help me in my insane motivations. He's like, okay. The peasants pledged their fealty to Sauron. Oh, get out of here. They pledged their fealty to Sauron. And
they were morons.
And Adar is like, I'm not Sauron. And he seems to not like that. So maybe he doesn't like Sauron, as far as I can tell. And then Arondir talks to Theo, and he's like, I'm good at shooting a bow. And they magically see this creepy thing behind rock, and Theo finally reveals evil dagger. Like that thing behind rock has been there for a long time. Is this not the tower where the elves have been? Were they not aware this was there, or did he know it was there?
No, he knew it was there. So what happened was, they go pledge their fealty to Sauron, which, to no one's surprise, but theirs, Adar was like, we only take oaths in blood, or something like that, and he forces the old dude to kill that kid that was Bronwyn's son's friend.
Yeah.
But I mean, later the orcs go to kill all the humans. You don't see a human in sight, so I would say that probably all the humans are dead at this point. But anyway, he's teaching Bronwyn's son. Arondir is teaching Bronwyn's son Theo to shoot, and he's like, pull your aim up a little bit more. And he's like, why are you teaching me this? And they go over some stuff, and he finally comes clean that he's got this dagger. And that's when Arondir says, I've seen this symbol before. And they go and pull these vines off the wall, and you see the skull and all the evil markings and stuff that were there. I'm pretty sure that the elves just kind of let the vines grow up over it because they didn't want to deal with it.
I think you'd remove an
yeah,
evil side from Sauron.
You'd think so. You know, while we're here, and we're going to be here for a very long time, let's get rid of this mess.
No.
No, they
No,
saw
they
it
just left
really
it.
old, and they're like, that skull thing belongs in a museum.
So do you. Anyway. He talks to Bronwyn. She's like, there's no hope, and he's like, there is hope. She's supposed to be a strong woman. I don't know why she's losing hope. We're back to Elven country, and he's talking to Dwarf, and he has his famous line of give me the meat and give it to me raw," which is really bad sounding, but implying that he's beating around the bush, so to speak, and not explaining what he means, as inappropriate as that line sounds. But he's like, "Oh, the Silmarils." We talked about this discussion.
Yeah, he basically at this point he's like, "Well, I was sent under a false pretext, and so by association, I was dishonest with you." And they have the whole conversation where he's like, "The elves need Mithril, and the fate of the elves is in your hands." And he's like, "Whose hands?" "Yours." "Say that again." "Yours." Yeah, it kind of implies that he's happy, and he's going to help. I shouldn't say it implies, because they actually wander as they leave. He says something like, uh, "It'll be really tough to convince my father." So it's he's there. He's willing to help. He's glad to help because
I
he's
mean,
going to have one over on the elves.
well,
But now
one
it's
thing
like,
perhaps
now
we
I have
should
to convince
move.
my dad.
Perhaps, Jason, one thing, because I just reflected on the fact that as we go through this, what I'm trying to do when I go through and explain the scenes is encourage sort of a review, because otherwise we're just explaining the movie. So why don't you explain to me what this scene means overall, as opposed to...
What the scene means is that he basically forgives his friend and sees that his friend is his friend. He's coming clean to him and saying, "Look, there was a false pretext, and I'm sorry." And so he sees that his friend is honest with him and not trying to trick him. And
Well,
at that point, he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to help you."
I suppose... I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this scene. I can't necessarily verbalize it, but it feels like it's necessary for plot progression, but there's something about the scene that doesn't... I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it seems really gratuitous,
I
if you
guess
will.
so. Because they set up this this thing of like, you can't tell anybody about it, and then they have a lot of like, you need to tell us about it, and then he's like, they really want me to tell them, and they had this scheme to get the stuff. It seems like a lot of scenes extrapolating what could have been done in like 10 minutes or less. That could have been done in 2 or 3 lines. Where he's like, "Oh, we've got this stuff," and he's like, "We need it." I don't know.
I mean, the thing is
they drug
that
out back and forth. It seems like poorly written dialogue that's been drug out through like a couple episodes.
So there's the part where Gilgalad is trying to get the dwarf to admit that they're mining Mithril at the dinner table, right? All he would have had to do is say, "Excuse me, Master Dwarf, we have this legend that this is how that this metal was created when blah 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 blah. We need some, and let me show you why." And take him over to the blighted tree and saying, "Look, we think that if we get the metal, that we can cure this blight."
I don't know if it
Will
needs
you
to be
help
that elaborate. I think he just needs to be told this is really important, and then he goes to the elf. He's like, "We're friends. Will you help us?"
Yeah.
Just
But
lean
they
on the
don't do
friendship
that.
aspect. But it feels like we've gotten like a long, drawn out back and forth over an issue lasting multiple episodes that feels like we've eventually come to the conclusion that we were expected to get to anyway. Why did we drag the story through? Was it really that important to the tension of the plot, to the development of the characters, to go, swear you won't tell anybody, and then a lot of conversation with the elves of like, we need to know, and then he goes, they want to know, will you help us? And I'm literally summing up a long, drawn out list of conversations happening between people. I think that's more of my issue, I guess, is not that this doesn't help progress the plot, but it seems like you could have done this so much more eloquently and more succinctly and how you get this point across.
Oh, definitely.
A lot of dialogue waste of time, I guess is my point.
But the thing is that I don't think that they had a good outline for where they wanted this show to go. And because they didn't have a good outline for how they wanted the show to progress, they're stretching things out that don't need to be stretched out, and they're manufacturing conflict where there isn't any and shouldn't be.
Yeah, they created a conflict, they drug out trying to resolve it, and then they resolved it. That's essentially what happened.
Yeah.
At this point, the elves and the dwarves should trust each other. But they're almost implying, well, elves and dwarves don't like each other. It's like, why? Because in the other movies, they didn't like each other. That's like, that doesn't mean they have to dislike each other now. But then they're creating this tension, and then they're spending all this time trying to resolve this issue when you didn't even have to create it in the first place. Right. This didn't even need to exist.
The implication was that when the dwarves were in Khazad-dûm, this is from the other movies, that the implication was that the elven word for friend was all you needed to say to get the door to open to Moria.
Well, they were so close and so much friends that they crossed between realms a lot.
And so there's no reason to have this distrust between the elves and the dwarves other than the fact that you don't understand what you're talking about and you're trying to, pad your runtime and you don't know what you're trying to do. You don't know what's going on. And you're just flailing around in the dark, hoping to actually flick on a light sometime.
Well, and it's like you could find moments in other pieces of work where they've created sort of unnecessary conflict and then had to resolve it. I'm just saying it feels like this is a common aspect of modern writing where they're just creating issues and then resolving them later, producing nothing of value. Because one thing that could be in this dialogue exchange, we could learn more about the characters. That could be a central purpose to what's happened in this conflict resolution sort of side plot that's been created. But the problem is we didn't really get a lot of character development as far as I can tell.
No.
We didn't learn more. They didn't become more personalities. We didn't get more out of them. We already knew they were friends before this issue was created. We already knew the relationship between the two. We already knew that there was distrust for some reason.
Apparently only Elrond and Durin were friends. Nobody else was.
Yeah. It's just...
Even though we know for a fact that the dwarves and the elves at that time were close friends.
You could extrapolate into this a side part where it's like they lean on the greed of the dwarves that they don't want to tell people. You could lean into that story, which might lead into eventually a Balrog scenario that eventually is going to have to happen in Moria.
Right.
But you're not leaning into the greed reason as to why they're not sharing that information, which I suppose lessens the dwarves in some way, but it's like it's an aspect of their personality, which might justify them trying to convince the dwarves to be more open about this treasure that they found, which could have led into justification for what happens with the Balrog, where they got to dig deeper to get more because, there's this lust for the Mithril, but they don't do any of that.
No.
It's all just this interracial conflict that exists and then is resolved, I guess.
And technically, Durin's father has forbidden them to dig for Mithril for some reason.
Well, I think we've beaten the dead horse. Halbrand looks at his symbol and he's like, screw this symbol, and then he goes back to get it, and then he's wearing armor as they're leaving. So I guess he figured out what he wants to do. They have this big moment of like consequence as they're all dressed to leave. There's leaves falling. They build it up as some sort of big moment, and then They make it out to be, oh, look how cool this is. Galadriel gets on the boat. I'm not a fan of her armor. I don't think it looks very good. The chest area seems like it's naturally like sits off of her body really far. It feels like that extends out really far up here in a weird way.
I can't say that I'm really impressed with any of their armor.
Well, the moob armor is really dumb.
Armor.
The moob armor where it emphasized their moobs. But my point is, if you notice on the upper part of the armor, there's a lot of, it feels like there's a lot of space.
Yeah.
Like this section
like,
sticks out.
Yeah.
And it might be that if they actually put it down closer to her body, it would have to express her feminine features. And maybe they didn't want to over-feminize her. So they had it extend to be almost like a flat plate, rather than to show the feminine attributes of her figure. I wonder if that was the motivation. Anyway, that armor sucks. It's not very good.
Yeah.
I was just confused. It's like, why does it stick out so far on the top here? Like, you could literally put sandwiches behind this. That's how much space she has in here. Just a little treat, a little snack. Yeah, anyway, they're leaving. It's supposed to be a big deal, and the episode's over. I want to hear from Silver. What are your reflections on the episode, Silver?
To me, this episode felt incredibly boring.
Okay.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I don't know. This episode felt kind of weird, and I can't really explain it. But
Well, explore your thoughts. Verbalize it to me. Give me. Use your words.
the words. Well, we hopped around to like everyone's perspective this time. Where in the last couple episodes we didn't. It kind of swapped back and forth between Galadriel and the hobbits and
Harfoots.
Harfoots, right?
Legally distinct.
Legally distinct Harfoots, and the humans with Bronwyn and whatever. I don't know. I feel like maybe this episode they were trying to show like, oh look, we're pushing the movement along, and maybe they're all gonna meet together. Is what this episode kind of felt like they were trying to do.
You think so? You
Because
think
they
they're
put
going to
everyone
draw
in
the threads together from the different plots?
Yeah, because why would you have this like pointless story going on with the Harfoots right now? Because really nothing happened with the Harfoots this
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
They're just migrating. So I'm like,
some
why else would
character
they try
stuff.
and show all of them? I
We
guess-
we did hear some more about how the Hardfoots are actually heartless and disgusting, because the one lady goes to her husband and says, "You should have taken their wheels."
Yet abandon them.
What? Yeah, it's like you should have left them miles ago. It's all because of that big dude.
History's greatest monsters, the Harfoots. Anyway, go on, Silver.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's the only reason why they had everyone's kind of plot in this episode, is to show that movement of like the story's carrying on. The characters are literally moving along.
It felt like last episode they established like it was the big like turning point moment where it's like, this is where we're going. This is what we're gonna do. This is where the Harfoots are going. This is where the Numenorians are going. This is where everybody's going. And then this episode is like, we're going, everybody. We're gonna go.
Yeah.
We're getting ready to go.
Look, everyone's moving. Look,
Yeah.
the Galadriel's
See,
getting on the boat. The Harfoots are going along. The
we know what we're doing.
villagers are
People are doing stuff.
excited. Yeah, look at this. We're doing stuff.
You know, you have an interesting point there. So theoretically, we haven't seen the next episode, but theoretically, I have a feeling that watching the next episode, we could possibly just take episode 5 out, and you won't miss anything. Because in 4 they're going,
Yeah.
we're going to go to Middle Earth. The Harfoots are like, we're going to travel. The dwarves and the elves are like Mithril. And then by the time we get to 6, it's like, well, we got the Mithril. We are traveling. We're going to Middle Earth. Like theoretically, it feels like you could remove 5 from the series and nothing would have happened. Like that you would be lost is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think you're right. It does seem somewhat like a filler episode that just doesn't need to be there.
I don't know if anything important was established other than horrible lore of the Balrog and the elf thing.
Well,
I feel like you could ignore that.
The few problems they created, they resolved. And the only 2 things that might be, I guess, the crux of the story that might be important to know that I can think of is Harfoot girl, not Frodo, now kind of doesn't trust the guy because he hurt her hand because she touched something she should have. So in the next episode, we might have this like, I don't know about you. And then I guess the elves really need the Mithril. But we already kind of knew that. We just didn't know why. So, tree reasons.
And I guess, like, why Isildur's now going to Middle Earth. I guess.
Yeah, but you might just go, oh, well, he got on the boat. Because you remember in the end of the last episode, they asked for volunteers and he raises his hand. So if you got none of the other stuff, you might just go, oh, they accepted him. He's on the boat.
Yeah. There he goes. Made it.
Yeah, you could have. Weird. You could have cut a lot out of 5, or almost the entire thing, and been fine.
I know, it was a very boring episode.
Jason?
Like I said before, this is just full of such logical inconsistencies and tonal inconsistencies, and it was boring. I found myself like yawning through it because it's like, oh man, nothing was happening. And there were certain things where it was like, I did appreciate that the humans who decided to defect, that they pretty much got what was coming to them.
Well, here's the thing, Jason.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll find something out about some of them later. But
here's the thing. I'm aware of what happens in the story, and I know they fight against other villagers in a big battle. So they don't get what's coming to them.
Well, some of them did. Because he said that, we only take oaths in blood or something like that. And so some of the villagers were forced to kill other villagers in order to show their loyalty.
So the worst one of them get away with it. The least worst, who were just hoping that they make a deal to not die, are going to get what's coming to them?
Pretty much. I mean, how stupid can you get? Let's go bargain with the orcs. The things that eat humans.
They should die, is the problem.
Yeah. And the other thing, the whole scene with Adar and the orc where he like forces him to uncover his arm. I understand that that does show something about Adar, but I felt that that was unnecessary. It just seemed really off.
You get a bit of character. Go ahead, Silver.
I was just gonna say, it's like they're trying to really drill it into us that Adar means father. So he's kind of like a father to the orcs in a way, which is weird.
That's true. You also get sort of an implication of he has an affection for them, and they have an undying loyalty where he can ask them to hurt themselves, and they'll do it. So there is some character stuff here. It's not without merit. And he does a bit of foreshadowing where he looks off and he's reflecting on the sun and he's like, we won't have this anymore. And once again, I know what's going to happen, but there's stuff there in that conversation. I think the actor's doing a decent job.
I did not to impugn the actor by any means. The actor playing Adar is doing a great job. I think he's one of the portrayals that I actually appreciate, because he seems to be leaning into his role as a villain and just kind of showing that um, he can be that villain. I just don't think that the scene was actually necessary.
You
Like I
got
said,
stuff from it.
true.
There
But the
were
thing
other
is
scenes that
that
were so much more useless than that one.
true. But like we said just a few minutes ago, it feels like episode 5 could be cut entirely from the series with no
Oh, sure.
problems
If you got
whatsoever.
rid of that, you would still know that he has an affection for the orcs and that they follow him. Like, that doesn't
Yeah.
change anything. It sort of rehomes.
Yeah, they established that when he first showed up.
Yeah, they don't really need to reemphasize that. I just found the moment well acted, that you could see some good sort of portrayal from this actor's sort of emphasizing Adar's perspective, reflecting on things. That he's a bit of an introspective character, that he's not malicious. They are doing the cliche, like, oh, he's a bad guy, but is really a bad guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing is that the way that I understand this is that there's supposed to be several characters that we could think are Sauron in disguise. Halbrand being one of them. Um, we could also think that Adar is Sauron.
Even
Um,
though he emphasizes that he super isn't.
right, and it's like, what are you doing here? The stranger could be Sauron. The Halbrand could be Sauron. Adar could be Sauron, and we just had one of them.
Well,
Not even at the end of the series is like, I'm not Sauron. It's like,
well, here's the
I'll
thing,
have them
Jason.
down here.
Here's the thing. They want you to second guess. They want to lead you around. Here's the problem. We
Yeah.
know who Sauron is. And they keep leaning against, or I would say away from, the guy who actually is Sauron. They want to give you the chance to be fooled that it could be someone else. Because the character who's most likely the person, not because I know who it is, but based how they're doing things, who would be most ironic to have be the individual, feels very
Right.
obvious, but they're doing every effort possible to be like, nuh-uh, what if it's this person? Nuh-uh.
Right.
And it's not working very well. They want you to think it's other people, but it's not effective. They're trying to lead you into making conclusions, perhaps being tricked by their clever writing, and it's not successful.
Right. And the thing is that it's really wasting our time and theirs.
Well,
Because
it's wasting our time because
if-
we're willingly watching this, but
yeah, that's true.
they're
That
getting
too.
paid.
But the thing is I still think it's a waste of their time too, just because of the this whole thing has been a waste from the get-go. But they have a huge opportunity here with Sauron, and they're really wasting it. We know that Sauron was the downfall of Numenor.
Well, there's reasons for why the story's presented in this way, and it's because of Christopher's son. I don't want to get into that here because it will mar our perspective on the show, and it will mar sort of anyone listening. But it's something we can reflect on later. But it should be said that Christopher's son wanted the show to reflect sort of story elements of other things, and that's why the show is the way that it is, and it's not good.
No.
But I think
Anyway.
we've said what we need to say about this this episode. Good Lord, stuff happened. It's not getting better. I'm not setting out to make the show out to be bad, but it's not getting better. But let's run out of here kicking and screaming. Thanks for joining us. Once again, you're a champ if you can last through hours plus of us talking about just a show we don't enjoy. But I'm giving it my best effort to be as fair as I can. But the problem is, no matter what, anybody is going to be subjective on the things that they watch. So if you disagree, that's fine. But
one thing I want to
soldier forward.
One thing I want to just point out really quick before we head off, for anybody who is thinking, well, you've got to judge it on its own merits. You can't compare it to other things. It's like, well, they started it. You know what I mean? They wanted to be compared to the cinematic, the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings by Peter Jackson. They've kind of adopted some of the cinematics and the look and feel. So that's one thing, and that's on them. The other thing is that they are adapting, trying to, and failing to adapt a work to the big and in this case the small screen, I should say, not the big screen. But again, that's on them. If they wanted to do something that's all on their own, we can make the argument that we shouldn't be comparing it to other stuff. But because they are adapting Tolkien's work, yeah, it's going to be compared to Tolkien's work.
Well,
it just is. There's no way to get around it.
We've had this conversation before, but just re-emphasize the rules. The rule is that if you're going to take the credit for having a show with the IP name attached to it, doesn't matter what it is, if it's a Marvel movie or Lord of the Rings, but if you want credit and an established fan base for having a Lord of the Rings show, then the downside is you're going to be judged against that show. That's the rule. So if you're going to make a show that's Lord of the Rings, then by that agreement, you are subject to a comparison to previous established work as well as the original. And if you don't like that, then don't make a Lord of the Rings show. Don't do that. Because if you don't want to be compared to previous established work, then that's your fault, not mine, for using the Lord of the Rings name. Then just make fantasy show something. Fine. But that's the rules when it comes to IPs. If you use an IP, you're subject to comparison. Because you don't get the credit and then go, well, I don't want any downside to this. That's not how this works. And that's that's the standard that we hold to. Let's get out of here.
That's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, well, that's the reality. Well, you get that a lot with they change a lot in something like a Marvel movie, and everyone's like, well, that's not what that looks like. So what's your problem? What do you care? It's like you're using the name, let's say the second Black Panther movie, you're using the name and you're changing everything about some of these characters. That's I mean, if you're going to use...
That's on you, not on me.
Yes, if you're going to use those, then I'm going to judge you by that. And if you don't want to be judged by that, then don't use those characters. Because they're already established in the lore. We already know what their personalities are, what they look like, how they act. And if you change all of that, well, then I get to criticize you for it. And that's your fault. Anyway, let's run away, kicking and screaming. We'll see you for episode 6. Goodbye, everybody.
Later.
If you like the show, follow Rhett, Jason, Ross, and Silver, the world's most lethally stupid internet personalities, on Twitter at DG Podcast or on Instagram at Distracted Gamers. If you liked or hated what you heard here today, you can email them at thedistractedgamers@gmail.com and share your feelings. Not that Jason would care, since he hasn't any, of course.
Oh my God, it's so juicy.